One thing I love about following popular music is that every artist, whether they are pop, rock, metal, folk, blues, jazz, any combination of these, or any other genre known to man, has a story. In the music industry and in musical lore, the tales are never predetermined. Some artists like Taylor Swift, Kendrick Lamar, Adele, Drake, and the Foo Fighters enjoy critical and commercial success consistently throughout their entire careers. If a blip exists in their trajectory, it's often negligible and easily redeemable. These artists become undisputed top tier icons. Other artists enjoy success from a breakthrough album with one or more hits and consequently experience stardom, influence, accolades, and the whole nine yards, only to never replicate that success or even approximate it again. These artists are usually, but not always, considered one hit wonders. Such acts include Alanis Morissette, Vanessa Carlton, Twisted Sister, Quiet Riot, Daniel Powter, Soft Cell, and Blind Melon, among others. But the artists with the most interesting stories, for me, tend to be those that achieved that iconic status. However, their success stalled upon lackluster reception to a particular album release. Despite the setback, these artists persevered and subsequently redeemed themselves with better received follow-up records. Since many music fans such as myself tend to revere their favorite artists, they don't like to associate them with any negative moments, and thus pretend those underwhelming records don't exist. When this process completes, these become forgotten albums. I'm your host, Dov Brenner, and welcome to Hotcakes from a 90s Stand, and today I will discuss the podcast's first forgotten album, One Hot Minute, released in 1995 by, well, we'll get to that in a second. I don't think I had too many hobbies as a 6-year-old. I remember enjoying soccer, Pokemon, and drinking soda at birthday parties because my parents didn't allow it in the house. I also really liked music, and more specifically, I enjoyed music videos. A babysitter, probably prematurely, introduced me to MTV, providing the genesis of my music listening outside the few artists that my parents spoon-fed me. 6-year-old me existed in part of the years 1999 and 2000, so the artists featured on MTV then included the legendary boy bands NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys, as well as other pop artists like Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Destiny's Child, BB Mac, Aaliyah, and Hanson. I also remember hip-hop artists such as DMX, Ja Rule, Snoop Dogg, Eminem, and, Kid Rock. The rock bands, though, appealed the most to me. The standout bands included Blink-182, No Doubt, Vertical Horizon, Three Doors Down, Creed, Train, and whatever the name of that band is that sang that one song about that girl who cried a river and drowned the whole world. But in addition to all of those superhuman acts to 6-year-old me, one band stood head and shoulders above the rest. They were definitely older and created music that produced a unique feeling distinguishable from the other artists. I distinctly recall the tone of the guitar evoking pleasant emotions. Beyond the dope music, that band made the most creative videos I had seen up to that point. One video featured the band in a video game, which reminded me of my favorite video game, Tony Hawk Pro Skater on Nintendo 64. The other video that caught my attention presented the band playing their instruments on non-musical objects in front of a black and white background. Sometime, most likely in the year 2000, MTV featured a clip of one of their live performances. My excitement for the band disappeared when I saw them take the stage sporting mohawks and covered in tattoos. Obviously, the prejudice was silly, but coming from a Jewish family, my dad at the time did not think highly of tattoos, so I viewed tattoos in that light and opted to focus my interest on more perceived clean-cut acts. A year later, my interest changed as I traded watching TRL for Yankee games and SportsCenter, and my personal life, whose details I won't bore you with, minimized the importance of MTV. So I basically only listened to music when I was in the car. My brother's taste always favored top 40, and my mom preferred playing her Barbra Streisand CDs, so that's what I mainly heard. I didn't spend a lot of time driving with my dad throughout my elementary school days due to his work schedule, but I preferred his soundtrack as he tended to play the lighter side of rock from the 60s and 70s with artists such as the Beatles, Beach Boys, Eagles, Steve Miller Band, and Elton John. Music lacked importance beyond the casual listening at that time, really until the fall of 6th grade in 2004 when my mom gifted 11-year-old me Good Charlotte's The Young and the Hopeless, either for Hanukkah or probably just to get me to stop annoying her. Already impressed with two of their hits I heard on the radio a year or so before, I ended up falling in love with the emo classic, but didn't explore their discography further. Instead, I seeked out CDs from bands related to Good Charlotte that my older sister and her friends deemed cooler, like Blink-182 that I had already had an affinity for from my MTV watching days, and Green Day who were riding the wave of their smash hit American Idiot. These three pop-punk artists rekindled the interest in music that those videos sparked years earlier, so my radio listening with the fam became a more focused activity. Then one night, early in the summer of 2005, while pulling into the garage, the song on the radio delayed my desire to enter the house. I asked my mom if she could wait until the conclusion of the song before turning off the car. I requested that because, though I hadn't heard this tune before, I recognized the vocalist. I connected the vocals with the same group that mesmerized 6-year-old me with their unique guitar tone and music videos. That same group that my naivety dismissed due to their alternative appearance. That same group that differed significantly in age and style from the rest of those 1999 to 2000 groups. The song, Under the Bridge, and that group, my favorite band of 17 years, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. If you ever get the chance, I highly recommend checking out the program Podcast 99. It's about the infamous music festival Woodstock 99. The Red Hot Chili Peppers headlined that festival, and one of the hosts of that podcast, Ryan Lichten, mentioned he thought the Chili Peppers were the perfect artists to headline the biggest festival of the 90s, since their massively successful albums, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, which came out in 1991, and Californication, released in 1999, essentially bookended the decade. I completely agree, which is why I consider the Chili Peppers a 90s band despite several popular works of theirs released in other decades. I also think it's interesting that Lichten omitted mentioning the other studio album the band put out that decade, One Hot Minute. Maybe he didn't purposely leave out that album. Maybe he just forgot it. To understand the reasons this album has largely been forgotten, ignored, and dismissed, we must understand the album's predecessor, one of the godfathers of the 90s alt-rock explosion, the left bookend of the 90s, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. But to understand that album, we must journey back to a tragic day in 1988, June 25th to be exact, the day the original Red Hot Chili Peppers guitarist Hillel Slovak died of a heroin overdose. Forget the effects of his death on the band's music. The other members of the band, Anthony Kiedis, Michael Balzary, aka Flea, and Jack Irons, had been friends with Slovak since childhood, so obviously his death devastated the surviving members, spurring drastic choices from two of them. Vocalist Anthony Kiedis, who was dealing with his own addiction struggles, used his grief as motivation to get clean, entering a rehab facility. Whereas Jack Irons had the most severe response to the tragedy, opting to leave the Chili Peppers, basically stating he didn't want to be in a group where his friends were dying. Thus, the death of Slovak left the band without a guitarist and a drummer. The Chili Peppers quickly found temporary replacements with Dwayne McKnight, formerly of the funk collective Parliament Funkadelic, on guitar, and D.H. Peligro, who had drummed for the Dead Kennedys from 1981 up until when they disbanded in 1986. The new lineup only played a few shows before it became apparent that the relationship between the band and McKnight would not work out. So the band canned McKnight, although you can hear his work with the Peppers on the track Blues for Meister off their 1994 compilation album out in LA. So, for the second time in 1988, the band lacked a guitarist. That very same year, a good friend of the band, singer-songwriter Bob Forrest, and his band, The Loneliest Monster, were also in the market for a guitar player. As McKnight's tenure with the Chili Peppers became precarious, Flea, the band's bassist, recommended auditioning for the Thelonious Monster to his friend, a teenage guitarist named John Frusciante. Frusciante had already been a fan of the Chili Peppers for a number of years, but since the band hadn't officially fired McKnight yet, Flea didn't feel quite comfortable enough to audition him. However, he did have the presence of mind to contact his friend, Bob Forrest, and let him know that the Chili Peppers, quote, have dibs on him, and that he couldn't get mad if they ultimately snatched him. If you've ever heard John Frusciante play guitar, you can comfortably guess that he killed it at his audition for the Thelonious Monster and was subsequently hired. At his very first rehearsal with the Thelonious Monster, a non-member of that band attended named Anthony Kiedis. Again, if you've heard Frusciante play guitar, you can comfortably guess Kiedis' impression of his chops. Flea and Kiedis called Frusciante that evening to offer him the job, to which he enthusiastically accepted. Alas, the new lineup consisting of Flea, Kiedis, Frusciante, and Peligro formed and has remained steady ever since. That's a joke, of course. While Peligro assisted in the songwriting of several songs which made it onto the next record, Peligro's own substance abuse issues resulted in his dismissal from the band. Subsequently, the Chili Peppers auditioned over 30 drummers, but didn't find a good fit until one of the final auditioners, the physically imposing, Detroit-based Chad Smith. Although impressed with Smith's craft, his appearance that day put off Kiedis and Flea. Smith wore a bandana on the top of his very long hair, which came off to them as goofy and a style perhaps better suited for a hair metal band. But with the encouragement of their manager, the band anointed Smith as the new drummer, under the condition that he shave his head. Smith showed up to his first rehearsal with his hair untouched, garnering the respect of Kiedis, who thought his refusal gave Smith a ton of punk cred. The newly formed lineup went into the studio in November of 1988 to begin recording the album Mother's Milk. The band chose to continue with Michael Beinhorn as producer, who had worked with the Chili Peppers on the previous record, The Uplift Mofo Party Plan. In addition to working with the Peppers, Beinhorn also produced hard rock classics such as Soundgarden's magnus opus, Super Unknown, and Hole's most successful album, Celebrity Skin. The band's label at the time, EMI, made Beinhorn aware of the urgency of the record, communicating that the album was the band's last chance with the label to create a hit. In 1989, hair metal bands like Motley Crue, Skid Row, Guns N' Roses, and Poison dominated mainstream rock music. So perhaps as an attempt to capture those audiences, Beinhorn steered Frusciante toward a metal-driven guitar sound rather than the slinky, funky guitar sound found on their previous albums, much to the chagrin of the rest of the band, especially Kiedis. My apologies for lumping Guns N' Roses in with those other bands, as GNR is a far superior band, but they too played sleazy metal and had long hair. Anyways, the Chili Pepper frontman said that eventually he couldn't tolerate Beinhorn's approach, culminating in an intense fight between the two, resulting in a severed relationship between the producer and the band. Regardless, Mother's Milk was released August 16, 1989. Musically, the album built off of the funk metal featured on the album's predecessor, resulting in their heaviest album to date. And along with bands like Living Colour, Faith No More, Jane's Addiction, Fishbone, Primus, and Rage Against the Machine, helped to solidify the prominence and influence of funk metal in the late 80s and early 90s. Mother's Milk became the Chili Peppers' highest charting album at the time, going gold, with a peak spot of 52 on the Billboard Albums charts, and spawned two hit singles. The first, a tribute to Hillel Slovak titled Knock Me Down, as well as a cover of Stevie Wonder's Higher Ground. Knock Me Down became the band's most successful single at the time, charting at number 6 on the rock charts. Although Higher Ground didn't chart as well, it still managed to peak at number 11 on the rock charts and further increased the band's exposure with a well-received music video, which got nominated for Breakthrough Video at the 1990 MTV Video Music Awards. Despite the success of the record relative to their 3 previous albums, the Chili Peppers felt it was only marginal and attributed part of the blame to EMI, causing them to switch to Warner Brothers. In April of 1991, they joined forces with legendary producer Rick Rubin, who had already worked with icons such as the Beastie Boys, Run DMC, Slayer, and LL Cool J to record their 5th studio album, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. The sessions occurred at a mansion in Laurel Canyon that Harry Houdini once rented and is said to have housed both the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix. With the exception of Smith, who commuted, the band stayed at the property during recording, which according to Flea helped maintain a more relaxed environment. The Chili Peppers welcomed Rubin's more subdued approach, which contrasted Beinhorn's more controlling leadership style. The album featured their signature rap funk rock on tunes such as If You Have to Ask, Mellow Ship, Slinky in B major, and Funky Monks. Though the Chili Peppers somewhat abandoned the funk metal that dominated their previous two albums, they did include a couple of tunes of that nature, such as The Righteous and the Wicked and Suck My Kiss. The inclusion of introspective ballads, in which Frusciante often accompanied with acoustic guitar, allowed for the most revolutionary change for the band that would alter the trajectory of the band's style for the next 30 plus years. Those ballads included the alleged story of Kiedis' romantic relationship with Irish singer-songwriter Sinead O'Connor in I Could Have Lied. The Led Zeppelin III-esque Breaking the Girl, in which he laments his role in a previous toxic relationship, as well as the vulnerable account of addiction, loneliness, and constructive reflection in the classic Under the Bridge. Although these ballads represented a maturity in Kiedis' lyrics, the album maintained the oversexed ethos that dominated the band's songwriting during the 80s, with sexual imagery in tunes such as Sir Psycho Sexy, Apache Rose Peacock, Suck My Kiss, and of course, the title track. As I mentioned in the previous episode, the record came out the same day as Nirvana's Nevermind on September 24th, 1991. The album became a massive success both commercially and critically. The first two singles on the album, Give It Away and the previously mentioned Under the Bridge, quickly became the band's biggest singles up to that time, with a number 1 peak on the rock charts for the former and a number 2 position on the Billboard Hot 100 for the latter. Roughly 2 months after the release of Under the Bridge, the single, the album hit number 3 on the Billboard Hot 200 in May of 1992 and went on to sell 13 million copies, signaling Blood Sugar Sex Magic's status as a crossover sensation. Not everyone enjoyed this success, though. The young guitarist started experiencing qualms regarding his membership in the band as soon as the Peppers completed the record. He saw the direction of the group as incompatible with his desires for the band. While the rest of the band relished in the newfound stardom and world tour playing in large venues, Frusciante resented it, preferring the more humble touring situation of the Mother's Milk era. That, in combination with his struggles with substances, led to his resignation the morning of May 7, 1992, while on tour in Japan. The other members convinced Frusciante to perform that evening, but the very next day he flew back to LA as an ex-guitarist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, where he would enter a tragic part of his life in which his drug use hijacked his well-deserved earnings with the band as well as his physical and mental health. Meanwhile, despite canceling the remainder of their Japan tour, the band regrouped in July of 1992 for the Lollapalooza tour with Eric Marshall, an LA-based guitarist who had worked with major artists including Etta James and Sting. The Chili Peppers appreciated Marshall's ability to learn the band's catalog so rapidly and recognized his chops, but did not feel that they would translate well in the studio. Therefore, he was dismissed before he could record any tracks in the studio with the band. However, he does appear in 2 music videos shot during his brief tenure. The band recruited Jesse Tobias in 1993 following Marshall's exit after Kiedis saw his band Mother Tongue perform at an LA nightclub. His brief stint with the Chili Peppers lasted less than a month, and no recording or live performance occurred during that time. But it all worked out for Tobias, who currently serves as the guitarist and co-writer for the British alternative rock singer Morrissey, and toured with Alanis Morissette throughout the late 90s and early 2000s. Even before Marshall and Tobias joined the band for their cup of coffee, the Chili Peppers wanted Dave Navarro to fill the vacancy that Frusciante left. Navarro made a name for himself as the guitarist for the alt-rock legends Jane's Addiction. Navarro declined the Chili Peppers' offer in '92 due to his commitment to other projects following Jane's Addiction's breakup. However, during the growing pains of Tobias' tenure with the band, Navarro became available, resulting in Tobias' dismissal and Navarro's entrance. Although on paper the partnership between Navarro and the Chili Peppers seemed like an alternative rock match made in heaven, the roadblocks appeared instantly, with Navarro struggling to feel impassioned playing the band's brand of funk. He ignored those concerns, stating, quote, "When I'm playing with 3 other guys I love and feel camaraderie with, it's enjoyable to play funk." He debuted live with the Chili Peppers on May 30th, 1994 at the Viper Room in West Hollywood, but played his first major gig at Woodstock 94. The performance became immortalized when the band took the stage wearing light bulb costumes and kept them on for the first two songs. In preparation for putting together their next record, the Chili Peppers began writing with Navarro. Kiedis characterized writing with him as difficult. He felt that writing with Slovak and Frusciante was natural, so much so that he simply assumed that all guitarists could just come up with accompaniment to the lyrics and melody he shared. The band returned to the studio early in the summer of 1994 to record their sixth studio album, One Hot Minute, with Rick Rubin returning as producer. Prior to the recording sessions, Kiedis relapsed as a result of being prescribed painkillers to deal with the discomfort from his wisdom teeth removal, reigniting his addiction. Consequently, Kiedis attended the sessions sporadically. So even though the instrumentalists finished recording rather quickly, Kiedis' absenteeism resulted in the prolonging of the recording process, which ultimately did not end until February of 1995. Since I want to review the musical and songwriting elements more in depth during the track-by-track analysis here in a minute, I will only briefly summarize the overall themes of the album. Rick Rubin injected his metal past with a much heavier sound featured on One Hot Minute than its predecessor, even perhaps with certain tunes exceeding the aggressiveness found on Mother's Milk and the Uplift Mofo Party Plan. In addition to his own role in steering the band towards metal, Navarro also incorporated psychedelic rock in the album's repertoire. Up to that point, they had only scratched the surface with that genre in their song Behind the Sun from Uplift. Although comparatively minimal, the album did feature its fair share of funk, and despite Navarro's ambivalence towards the Peppers' classic genre, he held his own on the tracks of that nature. Lyrically, the album is very dark, and themes of depression and addiction hit different, since Kiedis was going through those very things while writing and recording. One Hot Minute was released on September 12, 1995. Commercially, it did not match the success of its predecessor, selling less than half as many copies as Blood Sugar's Sex Magic, and failing to exceed Blood Sugar's spot on the Billboard Hot 200. Although 3 singles did achieve moderate success, the most successful being My Friends peaking at number 1 on the rock charts, none of them charted on the Billboard Hot 100. Although the album avoided ridicule for the most part, critics overall found the album a bit underwhelming. Robert Christgau called the album a dud. Stephen Thomas Erlewine of AllMusic gave the album a 3 out of 5 star review, calling the melodies and lyrics weak, and blasting the band for writing multiple songs in the spirit of Under the Bridge, with the sole purpose of pleasing the mainstream. Even while giving it a B+, David Brown of Entertainment Weekly criticized the length of many of the songs. Despite these lukewarm reviews, Dana Darzan of Rolling Stone magazine spoke highly of the record, stating, "After a 10-plus year career, they're realizing their potential at last." The band got into good trouble in August of 1995 when they released the music video for their single Warped. At the end of the video, Kiedis and Navarro engage in a kiss, much to the dismay of the record label. The optic of two men kissing in 1995 left many of their conservative audience upset. The Chili Peppers doubled down on the decision, with the October 95 issue of Guitar Magazine featuring Navarro and Flea sharing a smooch this time. While many retailers pulled the magazine off their shelves, the Chili Peppers were unapologetic of the kisses. 3 of the members of the band released statements basically all but saying "fuck off" to those who took issue. In late September 95, the band embarked on their One Hot Minute tour, and like the album's reviews, the tour was shaky at best. The Chili Peppers scheduled their U.S. tour to begin in mid-November of 95, but had to delay it to February of 96 due to Chad Smith breaking his arm at a baseball game. Overall, 33 dates were canceled due to multiple injuries that Kiedis sustained both on and off the stage. Fittingly, the last show of the tour and last gig with Navarro on July 26, 1997 in Yamanashi, Japan, as part of that year's Fuji Rock Festival, got interrupted and cut short due to a typhoon. In April of 1998, MTV announced that Navarro and the Chili Peppers parted ways. Although both the band and Navarro played off the breakup as a mutual decision, Kiedis wrote in his autobiography that Navarro's substance abuse hindered his contributions at rehearsal, leading to his dismissal from the band. Shortly after, following an emotional embrace with Flea, a newly sober John Frusciante re-emerged for his second stint as guitarist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Before I give my track by track analysis and reasons for why One Hot Minute has become a forgotten album, I will briefly discuss Frusciante's third album with the band titled Californication. It hit the shelves on June 8th, 1999, and not only exceeded the commercial success of One Hot Minute, it also exceeded the sales of Blood Sugar Sex Magic. With 4 hit singles, the Chili Peppers experienced their most success on the singles charts, with 3 number ones on the rock charts, and 2 of those tunes becoming top 20 hits on the Billboard Hot 100. The Chili Peppers' 2 following albums, By the Way and Stadium Arcadium, also maintained the critical and commercial success found on Californication, immortalizing the band as one of the most enduring and beloved bands in modern music history. And though many view One Hot Minute as an obstacle to that status, I think the record only solidifies the lore that has endeared millions of fans to the 2012 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees. For my track-by-track analysis, in addition to giving random commentary about each song, I inevitably will be corny and give each song a rating of either red hot, hot, lukewarm, or cold. Track 1, Warped. Perhaps their best opening song off any of their 90s albums, Warped perfectly sets the tone for the rest of the album. The lyrics are dark, as Kiedis depicts his shame, anger, and discomfort with his relapse on drugs. Although Smith plays a funky offbeat rhythm, that's really the only thing that's funk about this tune. Overall, Warped is an aggressive, heavy, psychedelic rock tune that concludes with a soft and ambient outro, which serves perhaps as a glimmer of hope that Kiedis will again overcome his drug issues. The song also foreshadows the heavy experimentalism found on the record, with strong delay placed on Kiedis' vocals throughout the verses. I welcome this first track with a rating of hot. Track 2, Aeroplane. Probably the only song on the album that the majority of the fan base still fancies, the album's second track begins in the style of the melodic psychedelia found at the end of Warped, before abruptly transitioning into funky pop rock. Lyrically, Kiedis continues to painfully hint at the tolls of his relapse with lines like, quote, pleasure spiked with pain that motherfuckers always spiked with pain, as well as, quote, someone better slap me before I start to rust, before I start to decompose. The interesting contrast between the darkness of the lyrics and the happy, upbeat mood of the instrumentals helps make it a standalone track. Also, non-indulgent solos from Flea and Navarro, along with Smith's less is more yet funk-filled drum parts, are the icing on the cake. The tune, though, only peaked at number 8 on the rock charts, which I deem a travesty. I consider this one an all-time top 10 Chili Peppers song, so I easily and without hesitation give Aeroplane a rating of red hot. Track 3, Deep Kick. When David Brown criticized the excessive length of certain songs, he most likely was referring to this song. At 6 minutes and 33 seconds, it's a pretty long one for sure, but for me it never gets boring. Another one of the more experimental tunes on the record, the first minute and 40 some odd seconds include minimalistic instrumentals, along with a spoken monologue from Kiedis describing his and Flea's coming-of-age spirit in Los Angeles before transitioning into their old-school punk-funk vibes with Slash meets Jimi Hendrix lead guitar from Navarro. Kiedis then recounts tales from their experiences in high school and their early adulthood. Right before the third verse, there is this gnarly interlude, concluding with one of my favorite moments from the album, a 10-second duet between Navarro and Flea. Deep Kick ends with a slowed-down tempo and a sung monologue, this time from Flea, leaving listeners with a friendly word of advice originating from the legendary rock band The Butthole Surfers, with, quote, it's better to regret something you did than something you didn't do. Though one of the most creative tunes in their discography, maybe David Brown did kind of have a point. I give Deep Kick a rating of hot. Track 4, My Friends. I don't want to talk much about this next song. Frankly, it's my least favorite on the album. Critics were dead on when they said this tune was an attempt to recreate the feel, structure, tone, and pop radio success of Under the Bridge. And Dave Navarro really should have thrown out his acoustic guitar after the success of his former band's hit, Jane Says, since it really doesn't work here. Kiedis' lyrics are even worse. I think the sentiment of the theme is genuine, but the delivery is detrimentally feeble. So yeah, overall, bad song. I give My Friends a rating of cold. Track 5, Coffee Shop. Whenever I listen to One Hot Minute in its entirety, I never skip My Friends, because it just makes the fifth song on the record even better. If someone ever asks you what funk metal sounds like, show them this tune. Along with Nobody Weird Like Me off Mother's Milk and Backwoods off the Uplift Mofo Party Plan, it's perhaps the band's heaviest tune. Flea's aggressive pop slap bass and somewhat indulgent solo to finish out the track crown him as the MVP. Everything else in this song supports the bass perfectly. The melody is catchy, Navarro's riff is sexy and ominous, and Chad Smith demolishes the Skins, all contributing to one hell of a song. I give Coffee Shop a rating of red hot. Track 6, P. Another example of the uniqueness and experimentalism of the album, the sixth song, P, features Flea and only Flea. In under 2 minutes, he and his acoustic bass tell an autobiographical story of getting bullied. This song is the second notable instance in which the historically boorish group takes a stand against toxic masculinity with the line, quote, "Fuck you asshole, you homophobic redneck dick." One of the most minimalist songs in the Peppers discography, other than a brief harmony at the end, it appears there is just a vocal and bass track. Flea's vocal and the tune sound refreshing, and the minimalism really allows for the listener to ingest the sobering lyrics. On the contrary to how the song might make you feel, I give P a rating of hot. Track 7, One Big Mob. At 6 minutes, the seventh song off One Hot Minute is another that David Brown has to reluctantly sit patiently through. Definitely a song that could have been reduced significantly in length. I certainly wouldn't call this behemoth of a funk metal song bad. I would, though, call it a skip-over song. One Big Mob's multiple bridges drag out the song and render its epic build-up anticlimactic. The extent of the band's experimentalism is commendable, but the song's uncommon structure comes off as odd rather than unique. Thus, I give One Big Mob a rating of lukewarm. Track 8, Walkabout. Much like Coffee Shop redeeming the inadequacies of My Friends, Walkabout exonerates the mediocrity of One Big Mob. The song continues the album's experimental tendencies, being perhaps the jazziest in their catalog. Navarro's exceptional guitar work incorporates elements of jazz, funk, R&B, and rock to complement the subtle approach of the tight rhythm section. The tranquility of the instrumentals enables listeners to focus on the interesting lyrics, in which Kiedis gives an insight into the walkabout, which is an Aboriginal Australian rite of passage from adolescence to adulthood. Also interesting, his delivery of the lyrics. He's not quite singing, but he's also not quite rapping, and the vocals are more melodic than just talking. So, whatever he's doing with his voice, it contributes effectively to this underrated gem. I give Walkabout a rating of red hot. Track 9, Tearjerker. Appropriately titled Tearjerker, this raw power ballad eulogizes Kurt Cobain as Kiedis pours out the sadness of losing his friend and contemporary. The lyrics represent a maturity for the band, as Kiedis pens arguably the most vulnerable song on the record. In the tender third verse, Kiedis shares the physical features of Cobain that he found endearing. I know it sounds silly through the lens of 2023, but I would imagine that talking in that manner about the physical appearance of a male friend as a heterosexual would be subject to ridicule within certain large circles in 1995, making it another example of the Chili Peppers' music running counter to the toxic masculinity of the era. Beyond the sentimental lyrics, Kiedis gives his best vocal performance of the album, showcasing a solid timbre and wide vocal range. Navarro also holds his own brilliantly in this tune. The chords and licks he plays are peaceful and gentle. He also demonstrates an ability to adapt, ditching his normal shredding approach to solos for a slower, more tender one played with clean tone. Songs serving as tributes to fallen artists occurred frequently during the 90s, but this one stands out. While the words pay homage to Kurt Cobain the man, through the structure of the song with its soft verses and loud choruses, just as Nirvana famously did, the music pays homage to Kurt Cobain the musician. I give Tearjerker a rating of red hot. Track 10, One Hot Minute. The 10th song on the album comes in hot. No pun intended. Right off the bat, you know this is not a tune that will help you fall asleep. It's loud and abrasive, and along with Coffee Shop, the heaviest song on the album. It's also hella catchy. So much so that I'm a bit confused as to why it wasn't chosen as a single, especially considering it is the title track. Probably because of its liberal length, though. The structure's dynamics keep it interesting throughout, even with an extended yet subdued interlude. The vague lyrics somewhat paint a picture of young love, but its prose will most likely not give you the feels. It's one of the few songs in their discography you can sum up as simply a solid rock song. I give One Hot Minute, the song of course, a rating of hot. Track 11, Falling into Grace. Another underrated tune on the record, it's one of the few songs on the album to feature their classic funk rock sound. Reminiscent of the Beatles' trip to India in 1968, Rick Rubin turned multiple members of the band onto transcendental meditation in the mid-90s. This likely inspired the romantic spiritual imagery found throughout the lyrics with lines like, quote, meditating in the morning, head dressed in white, beauty bazaar, and, quote, you can smell the purple light coming from her heart, get lost and wet. Navarro's unexpected Middle Eastern-style guitar solo adds another chapter to the book of experimentalism found on the album. Accompanying that chapter, Kundalini yoga instructor Gurmukh Kaur Khalsa chants towards the end of the song. Chanting is a common practice in her school of yoga. Unfortunately, Navarro's use of the talk box throughout the song distracts from the neat elements of the song. Therefore, I give Falling into Grace a rating of hot. Track 12, Shallow Be Thy Game. Continuing the album's countercultural attitude, the penultimate song on the record criticizes fundamental Christianity. Kiedis proudly celebrates heresy and independent thought and essentially tells, quote, fundamental hatred to perform fellatio on him. Another tune in the vein of the Chili Peppers' classic hard funk rock sound, the song's aggression along with its complexity makes it sound like it could have been on Blood Sugar Sex Magic. At around the 3-minute mark, Smith plays his best fill of the album, leading into a brief but maybe the most explosive jam on the album. Beyond his crafty fills, Smith wins the MVP of the song with his dynamic performance maintaining the fierce energy throughout. Overall, this song reminds me of Give It Away, but not in a bad way like My Friends, reminding people of Under the Bridge. It's just an upbeat, heavy, catchy, and liberating funk rock song. Shallow Be Thy Game for sure gets a rating of red hot. Track 13, Transcending. The final song of the Forgotten album is sad, drawn out, unfocused, filled with musical non sequiturs, contains probably the most awkward sounding bridge in their discography, and because of all that, serves as the perfect closer for One Hot Minute. In Transcending, the Chili Peppers pay tribute to their dear friend, actor River Phoenix, who died of an overdose on Halloween 2 years prior at the age of 23. Musically, the song represents the two ends of the spectrum that dominate the record, psychedelia and metal. The first half contains the former, while the second half accommodates the latter. The abruptness in the transition between the two perhaps represents the quick shift in emotions a person experiences following the unexpected death of a loved one. One of the most interesting songs in their catalog, Transcending paints such a clear image of the Dave Navarro era of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Therefore, although not one of my favorites, I have no choice but to give it a rating of red hot. Now that I have wrapped up the track-by-track analysis, I must ask a couple of questions. One easy and one hard. Let's start with a difficult question, which will inevitably spur many more questions. Why is One Hot Minute a forgotten album? I have to start this answer by mentioning the three groups of people, critics, fans, and of course the band, because they are the entities in control of designating an album as a classic or a dud. Let's start with the critics. Why did they feel that One Hot Minute was a poor follow-up to Blood Sugar Sex Magic? What did Blood Sugar Sex Magic have that One Hot Minute didn't? Also, part of the reason that One Hot Minute fits my definition of a forgotten album has to do with its successor, Californication. Why did the praise for that album eclipse its predecessor? Let's start with Blood Sugar Sex Magic. That album was full of surprises, but at the same time largely features an array of concise, well-produced songs that represented the funk core of the Chili Pepper brand. The music was more linear, with polished and filtered songs. The transitions between tracks fit like a glove. The structure of each song flowed, and Rick Rubin extracted every inch of musicianship out of the four Peppers on that record. And all of that equated to a magnus opus. One Hot Minute, on the other hand, was, for lack of a better phrase, all over the place, which I don't say begrudgingly, by the way. The experimentalism in part causes the perception of unfocus, perhaps putting off critics. Also, the curious song placement does not fit quite as well. The transitions between Warped and Aeroplane, as well as between Walkabout and Tearjerker, are on point, but the transitions otherwise lack cohesion. And while the musicianship definitely does showcase the abilities of each member, I'm not quite sure Kiedis possessed the vocal development at that point to abandon the frequency of his rapping found on previous albums. On Blood Sugar, Kiedis mainly raps, so when he sings on the album's occasional but significant ballads, it's like, whoa, this guy can kind of sing, cool. Switching a bit to their Magnus Opus Jr., with Californication, he mainly sings, but for that album, he showcases the improvement of his vocals, enough to designate him as a full-fledged singer, even receiving a comparison to Jeff Buckley in one review. Probably the key element included in both those albums missing in One Hot Minute that I'm sure critics noted, the presence of Mr. John Anthony Frusciante. To call Frusciante a generational talent is too obvious, and calling him a guitar god, too cliched. When Frusciante plays guitar, he squeezes the glue that holds together the signature sound of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and frankly, critics couldn't acclimate to the absence of that. So that's my opinion of the reasons for the media's dissatisfaction with the record. But why didn't fans embrace the album? Plenty of albums get heavily criticized but still sell exceptionally well. For example, critics abhorred Stone Temple Pilots' debut, Core, but it still sold over 8 million copies, the most for any STP album. Metacritic assigned a harsh 47 out of 100 for Katy Perry's 2008 breakthrough album, One of the Boys, but it still sold 7 million copies, especially impressive considering that era's presence of file sharing. And critics didn't love the Black Eyed Peas' 2005 mega successful record, Monkey Business, but that present-day shot of millennial nostalgia sold 10 million copies. So why didn't the Chili Pepper fan base come out and support One Hot Minute? I think the blame for this should be placed on, well, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I think their single selection and the order in which they released them could have been rethought. On Blood Sugar Sex Magic, the first two singles, Give It Away and Under the Bridge, achieved the most success. However, One Hot Minute's first two singles, Warped and My Friends, lacked the accessibility, memorability, and overall quality of its predecessor's opening singles. I think Aeroplane definitely should have been the opening single, with Tearjerker following. Aeroplane's catchiness and Tearjerker's relevance within a pop culture context would have intrigued fans and casual listeners far more than the ones chosen. But, way more than that, in our current year of 2023, I think One Hot Minute is forgotten because the Red Hot Chili Peppers want it that way. The album's songs rarely show up on the band's set lists, with P remaining the only song that the Chili Peppers consistently have played live with Frusciante on the stage. During the band's tour supporting their 2016 effort, The Getaway, during Frusciante's second hiatus from the band, they played Aeroplane live pretty frequently. But that song has not seen the light of day since Frusciante's return in 2019. Chad Smith said in a 2014 Reddit AMA that the reason for this omission of those tunes from their live shows is that the Chili Peppers don't feel emotionally connected to the album. I think behind Smith's gentle response rests the negative memories that several members of the band associate with that time period, especially Kiedis and Frusciante. Both suffered substance abuse issues, with Frusciante's addiction inches from irreparably destroying his life. The guitarist released 2 questionable solo albums during that time, the second of which Frusciante put together only for drug money. It's an incredibly unsettling experience listening to that record, to say the least. I'm sure for those 2 members, the Dave Navarro era songs forced them to relive a painful time. And since the Peppers have such a deep catalog, it's understandable they exclude them. But why do I love this album? I first heard this album in its entirety at 15 years old. an age typically filled with angst, confusion, and exploration. You can characterize One Hot Minute with those nouns as well. While Blood Sugar Sex Magic and Californication are triumphant albums, pain and sadness dominate One Hot Minute's disposition. The first time I heard the Red Hot Chili Peppers when I was 6 years old, the world was only triumphant, sheltered from the harsh realities. I didn't realize the pain, angst, confusion, and sadness so much of the world experiences every day. But conflict precedes triumph, and without conflict, triumph can't exist. One Hot Minute is the conflict. It's the separation from the cohesion, the sobriety, the sound, and accolades that surround the band's best days. But within that conflict, there lies a vulnerability which carries the ethos of the record, in turn making the album remarkably endearing. Also, usually when the Chili Peppers write about the heavy topics of addiction and depression, they're retrospective, such as By the Way's Don't Forget Me, Californication's Scar Tissue, and Stadium Arcadium's Snow. But on One Hot Minute, the intense lyrics and subject matter center on experiences Kiedis dealt with while writing, adding an emotional layer that connects me and probably other listeners to the songs on a higher level. The unpredictable instrumentals and song structure accompanying those unsettling topics augment its magnitude. Oh yeah, and most of the songs off One Hot Minute kick ass. My next guest has the clean-cut appearance of a boy band star 6-year-old me would have approved of. But don't let that fool you, as he is a massive fan of the hedonistic knuckleheads called the Red Hot Chili Peppers and talks mad smack on the basketball court. He's a Miami boy, economist, drummer, and good friend of mine. Please welcome Matthew Prieto.
Thank you, Dove. Happy to be here. It's going to be a great podcast today, I think so.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you were just telling me about that your band is working on an EP, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be good. We've been working on some originals for some time, but finally getting to recording it and putting it out. So,
now, what's the name of your band again?
Willow Lane.
Willow Lane, and then the name of the EP?
It's A Cloud a Day.
Awesome. And is it going to be like on SoundCloud? Where are you guys gonna?
We're hoping, to have it on Spotify.
Spotify, yeah.
I'm not sure where else, but definitely on Spotify.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to hear it. So let's get right into it. So what kind of music do you listen to the most currently?
I really like rock music for sure, and then kind of recently, the Strokes. I've just been listening to a lot of Strokes albums. Probably one of my favorite bands. Obviously, I love Chili Peppers, great stuff. Arctic Monkeys, bands like that. I just really enjoy.
So you like the alt rock?
Alt rock definitely is probably my number one genre music that I listen to.
Love that, and I feel like with those artists that you just listed, a lot of them heavily influenced by '90s bands.
I started noticing that. I was listening to '90s playlists the other day, and I just hit after hit. I'm like, wow, is this a great playlist, or I just love '90s music? And I found I just love '90s music.
Yeah, for sure. And so, what kind of music were you spoon fed as a child? I know from what what we've talked about, about your childhood. I don't assume you were spoon fed the Chili Peppers.
No, absolutely not.
Arctic Monkeys.
Yes, that took a while for me to finally discover that music. But growing up, parents kind of strict and all that good stuff, religious household, but only Christian music in the house. Occasionally my mom would put maybe some 80s music, like the Cyndi Lauper and all that type of stuff, like cleaning the house or whatever. I don't like that music.
I would think, based on what you have told me, that Cyndi Lauper would be too liberal for your mother. Am I wrong?
Right, yeah, this was like the special occasion. I like this music, but you guys really shouldn't be listening to this type of stuff. Yeah.
When did you start discovering music on your own?
Yeah, this was high school for sure. I mean, I was homeschooled in 9th and 10th grade, but went to private school in 11th grade, and that's really when start hanging out with classmates and this and that, and they're like, you gotta check out this, and that's really when I started listening to more music, and particularly rap music was really big into gotta listen to the new Drake album and this and that. So that's really where it started, and then just over time have been just exploring new music and all that good stuff.
It was like Drake and different hip hop artists. That was the type of music that you started to listen to when you were kind of figuring out music on your own.
Yes, definitely. Like almost exclusively too. It doesn't have to be Drake specifically, but just rap in general.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much always listening to rap.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is like what other hip hop artists were you listening to in high school other than Drake? Because I remember like high school for you was college for me. So I'm like trying to think of the artists, the hip hop artists that were big back then. I'm thinking Drake, Kendrick Lamar, obviously, J.
Obviously.
Cole.
Yeah, J. Cole is a big one for sure. Kanye West actually I listen to quite a lot.
Yeah.
Obviously his a little bit of issues sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't listen to him anymore.
Right.
But I would be lying if I said that I never had like enjoyed his music. I love, especially like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. That's one of my favorite albums of all time. Now I won't listen to it again, but I can admit that is a truly phenomenal record, and I'm really sad what happened to him. But we'll talk about more positive things.
Yeah, more positive things. Yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome. So Drake, J. Cole, and anyone else?
I liked Kendrick a lot for sure.
Yeah.
There's this group too, Brockhampton. It was like I have a few friends. We kind of had like this music group where we would kind of always recommend an album and then just share our thoughts and this and that. And they like really liked it. And at first I'm like, bro, these guys, they suck or whatever. But this is like, because I've never really even listened to any music, so it's just like you gotta like I guess mature into it. And I don't know, but
Brockhampton, I mean, they're still popular, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they were really small at first, obviously, but then they kind of did blow up, and then I did see them in concert.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, in Miami Beach.
Have you been to a bunch of hip hop shows?
No, one or two maybe, but some Christian rap artists. Yes,
what was Lecrae?
Lecrae is the big one. Yeah,
yeah.
I've been to like 2 Lecrae concerts.
Really?
Yeah, and then his protege was like Andy Mineo, and then I saw a few of those concerts too. But like looking back, I'm like, you listen to music and you're like, wow, this is only catered towards like middle schoolers and high schoolers. Yeah, like there's no way people with access to better music are listening to this.
I think I should have an episode for one of my hot take episodes or random topic episodes, really explore Christian rap, because to me that sounds like an oxymoron.
Right, exactly.
But I know, I mean, because I've heard of Lecrae, so obviously, he must be popular.
Yeah.
When did you first hear the Chili Peppers?
Probably college. I mean, past few years. I mean, I have just a few friends. That's kind of where I find my music recommendations. Just my friends were like, "Oh, check this out," and friends are always giving you recommendations. Oh, check out this show, and then people kind of shrug it off or whatever. But I always like when people recommend music, I always go listen to it.
Yeah.
So someone mentions it, and then I go listen to it, and then I really enjoy it, and then it's kind of the process.
So you shouldn't have told me that, because like I love sharing music with friends.
No, that's
like,
great.
To me, that is like the highest gesture that like I can give within a friendship, is to like share music that I like.
Yeah, it's kind of intimate. I mean, so people are like, "Oh, just check out the song," but even like my wife Jackie, like there's some music where I'm like, I won't put it in the car if she's there, because I'm like, what if she doesn't like it? Then, I mean, it's kind of personal.
Well, just find it on a radio station,
right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not accessible enough, maybe. But.
Yeah. No, the reference that I made for listeners that don't know Matt's wife, is that she, on the way to work, she likes to listen to the radio. And that's like such a normal thing. That should be such a normal thing, but like we've just kind of
20 years ago maybe.
But because of like, Bluetooth and aux cable, I mean, I either listen to CDs or I'm listening to to my Spotify,
CD. What is that?
Well, no, because the aux cable that I had for my iPhone busted, so I've been having to like listen to old CDs, which is actually kind of cool, because I still somehow in my car have like CDs from when I was in middle school. So I found, and I was gonna tell you about this. I found in Hot Fuss by The Killers, which was I don't know if it was their debut album, but it was their breakthrough album. It has Mr. Brightside and whatnot, and I found that, and every song was perfect. It was not scratched at all. And I bought that when it came out. I think I was 11 years old.
Wow. Yeah, that's one of my favorite albums of all time.
Really?
Yes, I love The Killers.
Well, we got to have you, if we have a Killers episode, you'll be the guest.
I definitely prefer Sam's Town, the second album, but yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Those are clear top two, though. Sam's Town and Hot Fuzz.
Yeah. Well, I really do want to talk about The Killers. I just think they're super interesting, because they really if you look back at their hits, I mean, they're really iconic. And like the amount of chart success they've had, and like live music success that they've had, I mean, is pretty impressive for a rock band.
Yeah, they're pretty accessible. Their music is just easy to sing along to. It's easy to listen to. So that's what they have going for them.
Oh, I read some music critic commented saying that Mr. Brightside is our generation's Don't Stop Believing.
I would take that comparison any day of the week. I mean,
yeah.
I could see it though. It's like it's a go-to for karaoke, or it just feels like a song that everyone knows, basically.
Yeah, and everyone knows, and like you said, it's so easy to sing along to.
Right,
super accessible. I love that's such a great. They're a great band, but this is Chili Pepper.
Yeah,
episode.
Chili Pepper. Yes.
And you love them, I love them, and so what are some of your favorite Chili Pepper songs or albums? If you're familiar with like their different albums.
Yeah, album wise, By the Way, I think is easily their top album, and whenever I want to just listen to just any of their albums, that's the one I always feel like has the best replay value. Yeah, so that's one I always go back to. But in terms of songs, I like kind of like their popular music, but Other Side, By the Way, they just have so many good hits. Snow's probably up there too for me, but I like their 90s stuff as well. I just feel like they kind of peaked around that early 2000s.
It's probably like 99 to 2006, because I feel like you had that trifecta, Californication, By the Way, and Stadium Arcadium.
Exactly.
And I think that's the way that, because there's been different generations of the Chili Peppers careers, right? There was in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, and then I think that there's that 99 to 2006. They had 3 albums with John Frusciante, and there was kind of that signature sound that they had. And so I think that there's something special about those 3 albums. But it's interesting that you mentioned By the Way, because that was an album that the first time I heard it, I was mesmerized by it. And for a while, it was my favorite Chili Pepper album, because there's something, it's so melodic and it's so tranquil. And also you do have By the Way and Can't Stop, which are more kind of upbeat, and they're funk rock signatures. But then you have songs like Cabron,
right,
which is, Flea plays an upright bass, and it's kind of like flamenco-esque.
Yeah, it's very different.
But no, I think that really, and I also think that's probably the peak of Anthony Kiedis as a singer.
Right, definitely best vocal performance, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And but yeah. Anyways, I apologize for going on that tangent, but I was more just because you mentioned By the Way. What did you think of, before I move into the next question that I had? What are your opinions of the Josh Klinghoffer albums with the Chili Peppers?
So you're talking, like, are these the early albums?
So the Josh Klinghoffer albums, those were after Frusciante left the band for the second time. So that was I'm With You and The Getaway.
Yeah, I don't know. I find myself not really coming back to the music, so maybe that does speak to what my opinion of it is. But
yeah,
they have a lot of music out, so whenever I go back to listen to Chili Peppers, I really find myself going back to, Californication or By the Way, or even kind of their earlier stuff, Mother's Milk, for example.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Man, I just have so many questions that I could ask you. But so I agree with you. Like, I don't think that Josh Klinghoffer's albums are as good, and I think, and it's because probably something you'll agree with me with, that John Frusciante is just so integral to the Chili Peppers sound.
Obviously they've made music without him, and that music they made without him is good.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels, I don't know, like a kind of a void that only he can fill.
Yeah.
Only he can fill it. Yeah.
It's interesting, and I don't know how much you know about the Chili Peppers history. Do you know about like Hillel Slovak and?
Yeah, I'm like mostly familiar.
Yeah, so Hillel Slovak is the original guitarist, but only did 2 albums with them. Didn't even do their debut.
Right.
Because he left to be in this other project, but that project didn't work out, so he came back to the Chili Peppers and did 2 albums. And I think you have the 2 Chili Pepper signature sounds, and I think it's one with Hillel Slovak, and the other with John Frusciante. But I think John Frusciante is the guitarist that casual listeners of the Chili Peppers, just casual listeners of rock music, are familiar with, because Frusciante is the one that was with the band when they had all the hits.
Exactly.
So Anyways, my apologies. I'm gonna go on a lot of tangents.
I mean, it's related. We're talking about Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
So.
But anyways, so what are your? Do you ever play or have you ever played any songs by the Chili Peppers on drums?
Yeah, I mean, I love to drum. I love to drum along to their music. You know, Danny California is probably the most. Oh, let me turn this on. And it's very easy to kind of throw in some fills and just go along with the groove and all that good stuff. But yeah, I like to just play along. Stadium Arcadium is probably the number one album when I just want to put something on and play along with. Definitely. And of course, had opportunity with Separate Checks to play some Chili Pepper songs. Yeah,
so Separate Checks, what he's referring to, that's my band. Well, I know last week we had Ryan Gilman on, and he's the guitarist. I'm the drummer of that band. And when I was in over last summer of 2022, I was doing some volunteer work in Mexico, and Matt took over for me and played a show, and he did a phenomenal job. And one of the covers that we do is Danny California.
Yeah.
But are there any other songs off Stadium Arcadium that you kind of like to jam out to?
I mean, Danny California is really the go-to. I mean, that's kind of the thing with me. I get singularly focused on different things. I'm like, oh, there's so many options. It's such a long album too.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's interesting because like one of my best friends in Florida, and he's a big Chili Pepper fan, and he loves Stadium Arcadium. That's his favorite album.
Really?
And I love Stadium Arcadium. It's a top 5 for me. But there's definitely, I think, a bunch of filler songs, especially on.
Yeah, that's my issue with it. Yeah. A little too long, maybe.
Yeah, especially on because there's like Jupiter, and I don't remember the name of the other. Yeah, was it Jupiter and Mars maybe?
That sounds right. Definitely Jupiter, but I don't remember.
So Jupiter is. I think if they had just released Jupiter, that would have been like an amazing album. That has all the hits: Danny California, Snow, Charlie, all that stuff. But it is. But what I do like about Stadium Arcadium, even with the fillers, is that I think the Chili Peppers kind of allow themselves to be a little bit more indulgent.
Exactly.
You know, and by the way, in Californication, they had that less is more approach. In Stadium Arcadium, they're just like, let's abandon that, you know.
Yeah. Indulgent is a great way to describe it, for sure.
And why do you think that the Chili Peppers have had such a big influence on rock and pop music?
I feel like they represent... Yeah, like they're just good representatives. So they represent, like, I feel like the state of California pretty well with like kind of the vibes and all that stuff, and even the kind of music that you kind of mentioned earlier, Cabron, where it's like, you know, kind of Mexican influence in California too. So it's like you can see that influence, and then also kind of just the '90s too. They're like, you know, they represent, and you know, specifically that One Hot Minute album where that really represents, I feel like, '90s rock. It's like, and you can see their influence across other bands as well, and you can see how they are influenced by other bands as well. So it's like kind of a culmination of a bunch of different factors coming all together.
Well, I love that response, and that's a good segue into my next question. So how would you define a forgotten album?
Yeah, just forgotten album. When you go to like talk about a band's discography, it's like it doesn't really come up much in conversation, or not when there's not really much strong feelings on it, you know. Yes, if you have a stinker, people are going to bring up, oh, I can't believe they had that. Or you have really good music, obviously, that gets talked about a lot. But where it's kind of something where it's people kind of consider filler, or maybe from a transitional period, things like that. But yeah, just something that just doesn't get talked about often, even amongst like kind of like big fans from the band.
Interesting. No, that's for sure. Like, I really like that take. And would you agree that One Hot Minute, by your definition, is a forgotten album?
Yeah, it's probably one of the best examples of a forgotten album. It's just because, I mean, I guess even particularly for the Chili Peppers specifically, they have so many albums out where it's easy to kind of forget some of the stuff they put out. But yeah, I mean, it's just because they don't have Frusciante on the album, and I think that's part of it. And, you know, just they don't have as much radio quote unquote hits on that album too. So people don't really, when they go back and look at the list, they don't really, this song, or they don't really have a hit song they kind of associate with the album. I mean, of course, you know, they have like Tearjerker and My Friends, and those are great songs on the album, but kind of just when it comes to more popular songs, they don't really have a kind of like a hit, so to speak.
Yeah, and that was something that I mentioned in the previous section, is that I think that part of the reason that the album wasn't as commercially successful as it could have been was I think they had a really poor choice of singles.
Right.
And because I think their first two singles on Blood Sugar Sex Magic Give It Away was the first, and Under
Give
the
It
Bridge
Away.
was the second, and those are two of their most recognizable, iconic songs, and those are great singles choices. They're probably two of the catchiest, songs on Blood Sugar. So, but whereas One Hot Minute, the first two singles are Warped, and I think the second one was My Friends. Mm-hmm. And I was like, to me, I think Warped's a good song, but to be released as a single, I
don't see Warped as a single, no.
Yeah. It is a great song, but...
That's the opener, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great opener. I liked the order of the song. I like it as an opener, but to release as a single, it does not really kind of like that. Something with that replay value or everyone's going to be singing along to the chorus type song.
Exactly. And I think for a lead single, and if you look at like the Chili Peppers discography, their first single is always a banger.
Right.
And it's always a big... I mean, you go back, going back and first you have Give It Away, we'll skip over One Hot Minute, then you have Californication was Around the World. By the Way was the title track. Stadium Arcadium, Danny California. I mean, these are catchy songs, brilliant songs that achieved, mainstream success. So I just think that, Warped is really a weak choice.
Right. I would agree.
But at the same time, I think it's a great opener for the album.
Exactly.
But for the singles, when you're trying to attract listeners to purchase your CD, I think it was pretty weak. And also, I know that Aeroplane was a single, but I think it was released too late because to me that's the crowning moment.
But to me, that's the one I would release as a single. That's really how you're gonna get people to be, oh, I like this sound, I like this song, I wanna hear the rest of the album type thing, kind of like a hook for sure. Airplane, I think has the most replay value, and I think that's what you would want in a single to kind of hype up your album.
Oh, absolutely. So I know you mentioned Aeroplane, and we talked a little bit about like My Friends and Warped. What are some of your favorite songs on the album besides those?
Besides that, Tearjerker stands out. But those three songs.
What do you like about Tearjerker?
The vocals. I mean, and then also kind of the guitar really speaks to me in that song.
I love that you mentioned that because, like in the previous segment when I was talking about Tearjerker, I mentioned that the two things that really stand out to me are Kiedis. I think that's Kiedis' best vocal performance in the album, which is not I don't think 1 Hot Minute's a great vocal album for him.
Right.
I think he saw the potential with his voice with Under the Bridge from Blood Sugar and a couple others like I Could Have Lied, and he kind of took that and was like, oh well, I can sing every song, and it's like you're not there yet, man.
Yeah.
You're getting there, but you're not quite.
You can see the progression though.
Yeah, and I think you do see his improvement on Californication, By the Way, Stadium Arcadium, etc. But not too much on 1 Hot Minute. But yeah, so Tearjerker is great, and I love Navarro. Like he really, I think he's a great guitarist, and that brings me to my next question. What do you think of Dave Navarro on guitar?
Yeah, he's definitely he's underrated for sure. People kind of dismiss him or like, yeah, he's fine, but no, he's really talented. Has chops, and people argue, oh, maybe he's a better guitar player than Frusciante, but Frusciante's a better fit for the band for Chili Peppers, but I don't know about that. But
yeah, I wouldn't say that Frusciante I think Frusciante's better, but I wouldn't say Navarro is better. What I would say is Navarro's a better shredder.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think in terms of virtuosity, I think Frusciante takes the cake there.
Yeah, and then Frusciante he's able to capture that funk feel that's really kind of integral to Chili Pepper sound. So it's kind of lacking with Navarro, but I mean, he still plays incredibly well. It's just not quite Frusciante.
And the thing is that the 1 Hot Minute Chili Peppers is a good band. It's in my opinion, I think it's a great album. It's not the Chili Pepper sound that people associate with.
Right.
Associate them with.
It would have been interesting if they were able to, with Navarro, make a follow-up album to 1 Hot Minute. That would have been. I understand. I think they had some issues with drug use and stuff around that time. Maybe could have prevented that. Who knows? But I think it would have been interesting to see if they, with that same group, made a follow-up album to 1 Hot Minute. What the sound would have been like. I think that would have been interesting.
It's interesting. I need to listen to it again. But they recorded one song with Navarro after 1 Hot Minute. And I started listening to it, and it was just kind of a draft, if you will.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'll have to send that to you. I don't remember the name of it, but it kind of gives you insight into what Navarro follow-up would have been. But I think in a parallel universe, it'd be interesting to see what what would have happened with the Chili Peppers if Dave Navarro was with them? Like, would they be looked at like they are now? Because right now they're essentially like, their status is like Guns N' Roses, or not maybe the Rolling Stone, but like Guns N' Roses and Nirvana, and there's like those really popular late 80s, early 90s bands, and they've been able to just be incredibly influential and regarded as one of the most important bands in the last, I don't know, how 30, 40 years. But with what would have happened if would that have been the case if Frusciante hadn't come back to the band, if it was just Navarro, or if there was some other guitarist that replaced Navarro?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think you can do all that without Frusciante. I think it's necessary that for kind of where they're at now, I don't think they get there with just Navarro.
Here's another interesting question. What happens if Frusciante, because about like what happened to Frusciante during the 90s?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So
he, just was having a lot of issues with drugs, especially heroin, and he was inches from destroying his life irreparably, and I just wonder if he is unable to rejoin the band, Navarro's fired, the Chili Peppers decide to break up, and the story of the Chili Peppers is 1983 to 1998. What is the Chili Peppers' legacy like? How are they looked at?
Yeah, probably, pretty well known amongst, rock fans and 90s fans and things like that, but they don't reach that level of kind of status as you were saying of like, the Nirvana or even Rolling Stones. I'd put them in that same kind of tier where, because, their longevity, even they've had recent music within the past year or two, and it's still catchy music, still good music to people want to sing along to, people want to cover it, people want to play it, and that longevity doesn't. If the band doesn't play, for that long period of time, I don't think they have that quite have that legacy.
Yeah, they're probably looked back. It's interesting. I think that if they had broken up after One Hot Minute, or if Navarro had continued with the band and they just didn't have any other really successful albums after that, I think they would have been regarded as Jane's Addiction, which was
right,
exactly, Navarro's previous band. That and Jane's Addiction was an incredibly important band in the history of alternative rock, but
nobody really talks about them.
No.
Not even close to the same level of popularity or legacy as Chili Peppers or Nirvana or a band like that.
Right, they might give you a shot of nostalgia.
Right.
But they're not going to be up there. They're not. Jane's Addiction, to my knowledge, not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Chili Peppers are. Have you listened to Jane's Addiction before?
Yeah, even in anticipation of this, because I know that's kind of Navarro's thing as well. But I like their music for sure. It's just different vibe, and I like the Chili Peppers more.
Yeah,
just put it plainly.
I can't really get into Jane's Addiction too much, but like I understand their importance.
Right.
And it makes sense as to why they would want Navarro, because they weren't a funk band per se, but they did have element. Like there were definitely instances, if you listen to their music, where like I think you can kind of hear a little bit of funk, and so that's why they're like, oh, we're alternative rock.
Yeah.
Jane's Addiction, alternative rock. Let's get Dave Navarro.
Just alt rock. You have Navarro. You can just put out anything and be in that genre, I guess.
But so would you say that the way in which One Hot Minute has been kind of largely forgotten over the years, do you think it's justified?
I think so. I do, because I'm in that category as well, where kind of the people who don't bring it up or mention it. It's just like, yeah, I've heard it, I've listened to it a few times, I enjoy it, but it doesn't have that replay value, doesn't have that much legacy. I don't really think someone hears One Hot Minute and it's like, oh, I'm going to learn guitar, because that album really inspired me. Right. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. But you still would say like Aeroplane is a song that you still, would listen to frequently, or no?
Yeah, someone plays it, I'll be singing along for sure, but I think Aeroplane's kind of dragged down by being on One Hot Minute, in the sense of, I feel like if it was on another album, then it would be even more popular of a song, if that makes sense.
For sure. Well, when I saw the Chili Peppers in 2017, excuse me, was when Josh Klinghoffer was on guitar, and they played Aeroplane live. And to me, that was, and I've seen the Chili Peppers a bunch of times, and that was one of the most special moments, because to me, that's Aeroplane. I think is definitely an underrated song.
Oh, 100%.
It is really. I mean, we could could we spend some time dissecting it?
Yes, go for it.
And I talk about it in the previous segment, but it's just, you've got this. It is probably the one song on the album that has that signature Chili Pepper like funk rock.
The funk is really what carries that song for sure.
And like Navarro really holds his own. Like he does a great job playing funk guitar and kind of letting Flea, take the spotlight. But at the same time, you have Anthony's just pouring out his emotions, hinting about getting back, hinting about, or pouring out his emotions about his depression, but hinting about relapsing on heroin. And you've got just so many things going on at the same time. And then randomly, Flea's, daughter's like third grade class or whatever is like, they're like singing like It's My Aeroplane. And it's just,
it all comes together quite nicely.
Yeah.
When you if someone kind of describes it to you like that, oh, we're gonna have this, and this, and we're gonna piece it all together. It's like, I don't know, but when you hear the song, it really does kind of very cohesive.
For sure. And that's a song that like I understand why they don't play any of those songs anymore. I get it. Like Kiedis and Frusciante were going through really rough times, and playing those songs brings back horrible.
Of course,
I get it. I understand it. But I think Aeroplane is I think playing that song, I think would mean a lot for fans.
Yeah.
But I get it. I'm not. That's not a hill that I'm going to die on.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm just happy Frusciante's back with the band, and I got to see them.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's a big deal. And the recent stuff is really good too. I really.
Oh yeah. What do you think of the recent stuff? The Unlimited Love and with the Return of the Dream Canteen.
It's capturing that. It's almost like putting me back in time. I feel like where it feels like I'm in California or in the 90s or whatever, kind of just enjoying the music and feeling the vibe and all that stuff. But yeah, really catchy, some good stuff, some filler, but overall like very strong return to.
And I think that's rare for a band at their age, and that many years removed from their heyday to be still putting together music that people are talking about.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's where it's not just that they come back kind of like a cash grab, like this music has artistic value. Yeah. This is stuff I'm going to be having on loop. Like I really enjoy it. And not even just for Chili Peppers fans, just, rock fans in general too. Like, like the song's pretty solid. So.
Well, that's what to me sticks out as one. I always love looking at like just different artists on Spotify and seeing like their play, like how many plays of their different songs. And because that kind of puts it into a different context.
Right.
It's like you see how many pop fans are listening to the Chili Peppers, and the amount of plays they get is unbelievable. And I just think it's really interesting for a band to have that unique of a sound and unique of a genre to appeal to so many people. And I know there's a lot of people that aren't really into their music, but I think everybody, regardless of what they say, can find a Chili Peppers song that they enjoy.
Yeah, there's no way that you're not going to find someone who hates them and doesn't like a song, I feel like, unless they just want to be contrarian or want to be different or something. But yeah.
And even if they don't like them and they're like, they'll be like, yeah, but Flea is really good. Yeah, Frusciante is really good.
Yeah,
I think Chad Smith is so underrated.
Extremely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, a lot of songs where he's kind of carrying it a little bit, but
and I do like how I feel like as the Chili Peppers' career progresses, I feel like he becomes more indulgent, and I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like just a natural progression too, over time, and you have so much music out, and I feel like a natural progression where you become naturally indulgent, and then you have that whole arc. But yeah, I mean, all the guys are super talented in
for sure, absolutely. And my last question is, this might be a difficult question to ask or to answer,
right?
But what is it about the Chili Peppers that you love?
The accessibility. So when I listen to the music, I feel like it's like two things at once. Where it's like I feel like it's so indie and so unique, and like it's like catered towards me, but it's so popular and so many people enjoy it. Where that's kind of like what I like about them is that I'm not alone in liking them. I can kind of mention their music to other people, and they know what I'm talking about. And I mean, stylistically and musically, they're obviously, I feel like, objectively good, and it's just so enjoyable to listen to. And when it comes to like, oh, I want to pick up a guitar and learn something, Chili Peppers is one of the top bands that comes to mind, where it's like I need to go listen to them to kind of get some ideas and maybe play along here.
Awesome. All right, Matt. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out.
Yeah, of course.
Doing this. This was a blast.
This is a great time here. I mean, appreciate the questions, and I, of course, was honored to be here with you. I mean, you are probably the biggest Chili Peppers fan I know. You know all about their history and all that good stuff.
Well, yeah, I was hoping that I wasn't coming off as professorial, but it was one of those things like, oh, he said this, I can talk about that thing. You know?
Yeah.
So I appreciate you humoring me with that, if you will. But yeah, this was awesome. And,
so let me ask you real quick.
Yes,
so where does One Hot Minute rank for you in their discography?
I would say number 5.
Oh, really?
I'd say number 5. Yeah, I think it's the best non-Frusciante album by a lot.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that.
I would say so. My top 5, I'd say Blood Sugar's my favorite.
Okay.
And then I'd say number 2 probably Californication. 3 By the Way, and I'd say Stadium 4.
Okay.
And then One Hot Minute. I think One Hot Minute it's not an unbelievable album. It's not an amazing album, but it's a great album.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like the way that it's dismissed. And people that talk about the Chili Peppers' presence in the 90s talk about Blood Sugar and Californication and ignore One Hot Minute because it's a key part of their history.
Yeah, definitely. Even just like because when you just see the music on Spotify, where you're like, oh yeah, the gap in years or whatever, but when you have that context of what's going on in these guys' personal lives, and you start listening to their lyrics more intently, you kind of see that bigger picture. And yeah, it's very important to the 90s music scene, but also to that band specifically.
For sure. And hopefully maybe one day they will play more than just pee occasionally. So
right
from One Hot Minute. But anyways, yeah, Matt, thank you so much. This was awesome, and I can't wait to hear Willow Lane's
yeah, of course.
EP.
Yeah, appreciate it, Dove. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to Matt Prieto for being an awesome guest. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and that whatever the rest of it brings, hopefully music is involved. Again, I'm Dove Brenner, and this is Hotcakes from a 90s Stand. Take care.